welcome back to the Headline Interview with me, Anthony Baxter. My guest today is the campaigner Peter Tatchell. Now, before the break, we kind of looked at a very quick history of some of the things that you've been involved in from when you were 15 until now. What we didn't touch on was your political attempts, say, as it were. So in 1983, the Bermondsey by-election, you decided to run for that. It wasn't a success, and actually, I quote, it's been described, I think, by you as kind of one of the dirtiest campaigns in history, as it were. What is it that makes you feel like it was like that?
I think the general consensus from most observers was that the scale of violence during that campaign was almost unprecedented. I was physically attacked over 150 times during the campaign. I had over 30 death threats and more than a dozen violent attacks upon my home, including bricks to the window. That's pretty unusual in election campaigns, and it was very, very scary. I was literally living in fear of my life during that campaign. And I did not win that seat. I should have, but I didn't. And that was partly also, of course, because of the way in which a lot of the tabloid newspapers did a non-stop drip, drip, drip effect almost every day of negative, hostile stories. They weren't interested in my vision. Now, I had two great ideas for that constituency. The first was to defend the local working class community against the invasion of property speculators who wanted to carve up the riverside for luxury flats and office blocks. So I was dead against that. I said that this was going to be the decimation of the local community, that local people would be squeezed out. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened over the preceding years. The other big vision I had was to transform Bermondsey into a garden city, to use it as a model for inner city regeneration, to green the whole area, to make it a more people-friendly, environmentally friendly region or space, to act as a model for the rest of London. Sadly, I never got to fulfill those ideas, but I think that vision is still an important one, not just for Southwark and Bermondsey, but also for the whole of London.
And the garden city idea is one that you're still passionate about. It's one of your ideas. You want to see 1 million new trees planted in the city. Just talk us through this idea.
Well, we all know that the air quality in London is appallingly low. We're violating European Union standards. It's damaging the health, particularly of elderly people and young kids. That is not acceptable. Now, if we could plant 1 million new trees, that would not only soak up some of that pollution, it would also soak up carbon dioxide and therefore contribute to tackling global warming. And it would also beautify the city. It would make the city a more beautiful place. All the research shows that people who live in cities with lots of trees and parkland are much happier, more content, more fulfilled. They enjoy their living space much more. So it's an obvious idea. And one sort of side issue I propose was the idea of trees for life, that in addition, perhaps the GLA could fund the selling at perhaps a token price of £1 of fruit trees to Londoners to plant in their own gardens so that London could become more food self-sufficient. It's a simple idea, relatively low cost. I don't know why any politician hasn't taken it up.
Yeah, it seems to make sense on that basis, and I think there'd be very few people who would argue against having more trees. One which I can imagine would perhaps cause more controversy is the idea of digging up the Mall and turning it into an ice rink. I can imagine some people saying, well, actually, we wouldn't want that. But just talk us through that idea.
Well, the Mall, which stretches from Buckingham Palace to Trafalgar Square, is one of the great grand thoroughfares of London. But it's taken over by cars. It's ugly. What I would do is I'd dig it up and create a shallow pool from the ICA to Buckingham Palace, or near to Buckingham Palace, to create a reflective pool, similar to the one by the Washington Monument in the United States or by the Taj Mahal in India. It would be a beautification of that ugly street and give it a real grandeur and vision and beauty. But in winter, I'd freeze it over to create the world's biggest public ice rink. A publicly accessible ice rink in the heart of London on a huge scale, not only a beautiful sight to behold, but also a fantastic community amenity.
It would certainly be a tourist attraction, without a doubt. You would bring a lot of people there to look at that.
Yeah.
Do you think it would ever be a reality?
Again, the cost is not huge. We just have to get away from this idea that the Mall is for cars. It's not. It should be for people and the beautification of London.
Okay, talk me through the Embankment sculpture garden. Now, this is the north side of the river at the moment, which, in your words, I think is void of any kind of beauty or arts installation. Is that right?
That's right. The whole of the Victoria Embankment is a car zone. This precious real estate on the bank of the Thames is given over to cars. What I would do is close Victoria Embankment to cars from Westminster Bridge to Waterloo Bridge, and possibly put the cars underground in a tunnel. But whatever, grass over that whole area that's currently roadway to create a beautiful riverside parkland with cafes and maybe art exhibitions. But my big idea is what I've called the Embankment Sculpture Garden. So in that swathe of grassland on the river, you'd have maybe a rotating exhibition of perhaps about 200 contemporary sculptures, which again would be a fantastic amenity, a real cultural feast for Londoners, and a huge tourist attraction as well. Again, I can't understand why no politician can see that wasting the Victoria Embankment with cars is not a sensible way to use that riverside frontage.
Are you anti-car?
Cars have their place, but I don't think they should dominate the city. That's why I also want to see what I've called car-free Sundays in the West End. You know, again, the West End, the fumes and the traffic are killing people. They make it an unpleasant environment. There's congestion with traffic. There's traffic accidents. People have to dodge in and out between cars. For a trial period of 3 months, and possibly open to renewal if people enjoyed it, I would say that the whole of the West End should be car-free on Sundays for a start. And we should see how it goes. Not only would that reclaim the streets for pedestrians and, you know, reclaim all those cultural and commercial places for visitation rather than, you know, dodging in between the traffic. But of course, those vast pedestrianised streets like Regent Street, Oxford Street, they could be in part given over to open-air concerts, art exhibitions, outdoor street cafes. You know, again, the potential is so fantastic, and we're not using it because we're allowing the car to dictate to London. And, you know, I'm pretty certain that after the 3-month trial period, most people would want to continue it and make it permanent.
And within this plan, this car-free Sunday, would public transport be allowed so that people can get around still? Would we have buses and taxis in this area, or
no taxis, but perhaps a limited bus service, so that people with mobility problems will be able to get around.
Okay.
But I think we have to make it clear that the streets are safe for people, they're less polluted, and we give over those spaces to other things that Londoners can enjoy.
Something else you think is underused is the Thames, and you'd actually like it to be considered the 14th tube line. There are plenty of boats on there at the moment. It seems to work already. Why do we need to improve that?
Well, first of all, our roads are congested, the underground is congested, we need to relieve it. And the Thames is the great London superhighway. It is massively underused. There are a constellation of private boat operators, but there's no coordinated system. What I'm proposing is to make the River Thames the 14th tube line, to integrate river bus services using hydrofoil and hovercraft between Hammersmith in the west and Greenwich in the east, with only about 8 stops in between, all linked to tube stations. So the whole system would be integrated into the mainstream London transport network, and it would be Oyster card accessible. That way, if these services ran every 5 to 10 minutes all throughout the day, you'd very soon start to get people off the roads and off the underground, off the buses, onto this faster, more efficient way of moving people around the capital. Again, it's an easy peasy idea. We just need to have the will to make it happen.
Surely your position then, if you were to stand for Assembly, you would be in the right place to try and make some of these ideas actually happen.
Yeah, but I'm not too sure that me alone as an Assembly member would be able to do that. And of course, I have already been lobbying. These are all ideas from my election campaign in 2000. And one of the other ones was the idea of cycle superhighways. And at last, after a bit of lobbying transport to London. That's becoming a reality. It's not entirely the scheme that I envisage, but it's moving in the right direction.
You're obviously passionate about London. London is obviously a city which you love and you want to see improved. These obviously ideas here would do that in your view. This is the way that you'd like to see London in the future.
Absolutely. We've got to have politicians with vision. Now, the Garden Bridge is a great new vision. We need more ideas like that. And I just find it so sad that politicians have such low horizons. This is one of the greatest cities in the world. I just love living here, but I can see so many ways in which it could be made better. And I'm sure there are people with sharper minds than mine that can come up with even better ideas. I say, let 100 flowers bloom.
OK, Peter, we're going to take another short break. Plenty more to come on today's headline interview with Peter Tatchell.